if the secret to your next breakthrough wasn't doing more, but slowing down? In a world that glorifies hustle, the most radical act of self leadership might be just pressing the pause button. This conversation reveals why stillness is not weakness, but the doorway to clarity, alignment, and true success. Hi, and welcome to the You World Order Showcase podcast, where we feature life, health, transformational coaches, and spiritual entrepreneurs stepping up to be the change they seek in the world. I'm your host, Jill Hart, the Coach's Alchemist, on a mission to help coaches and entrepreneurs amplify their voice, monetize their mission, and get visible, leveraging podcasts and Substack. Today, we are chatting with Tania Davies. Tania, known as the Conscious Change Agent, is a clinical hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, and spiritual facilitator who helps high-achieving women reconnect with their inner wisdom and step into soul-aligned success. As director of the Mindful Impact Wellness Hub and creator of the Pause with Purpose and Strategic Slowdown frameworks, she bridges science, psychology, and spirituality to guide clients out of burnout and into balance. With warmth and depth, Tania shares how slowing down can heal, align, and awaken you to your highest potential. Welcome to the show, Tania. Great to have
Thank you
you
so
here.
much for having me, Jill.
So let me ask you the big question and we'll get rolling, okay?
Okay.
What's the most significant thing, in your opinion, as individuals we can do to change how the world is going?
That's pretty counterintuitive in this hustle culture that we're all in, but it is exactly what you said before. It's about actually taking a moment to strategically slow down. And there is the word strategic in there for a reason, to strategically slow down so that we can actually do things that are fundamentally important to our physiology and psychology. Let's just start with the concept of actually slowing our nervous system down. Because I don't know about you, but most of the people I know, especially those in business, working mums, hustle dads, we're all so busy living in the chaos that we don't even know who we are anymore. We're kind of losing our identities. And we've got a bit of a short fuse with each other, if you may have noticed at a global level. And I think that's very much coming down to the fact that there's this bubbling level of resentment that's just moving through society because we just don't know who we are, don't have enough time for ourselves because society has just sucked everything out of us and there's nothing left for us to just be in this world. And so I think the concept of the strategic slowdown has very much come from my experience in that hustle, that corporate culture that I used to be in. Now running my own business, there's a different type of hustle when you run your own business, but at the same time, there's that still underlying resentment. As long as you slow down and look after yourself in the right ways, I think we can let all that go. And it definitely changes the mood globally when we actually start to do things for ourselves. And it's a place of selfishness. I think fundamentally we need to do it inside before we start looking outside with any concepts in our world. This just happens to be one where that the term of the strategic slowdown is about not letting just everything stop in your world. That's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about the things that really matter to you, such as, for example, your health. That's areas where we would very strategically look at your life to go, what's not working here? What is working, but what's really not working? And how can we work on those individual parts? And let's also look at what universally across your life is working, and let's amplify that. That doesn't mean slowing down completely. I mean, I'm the fastest talking, fastest thinking slow coach in the world. So I'm not talking about just slowing everything down. So let's get rid of that idea at the beginning. We are talking very strategically about working on yourself so that your nervous system can come back to regulation, because we can't exactly connect with our higher self and everything else that we have planned for us when we're in such a hustle space.
That is for sure. And there's a difference between being lazy, which often has a bad connotation to it, and strategically slowing down or making space for yourself where you don't have planned activities. The world is so busy right now that often we're driven by our calendars or our work schedules, and we're just like always the next thing has to get done, because if we don't, then those four other things aren't going to be getting done either, and then we're just like way behind the eight ball, and then stress happens and we're like, ah. Whereas if you plan time into your calendar and if you make space for yourself that it doesn't have like a to-do thing attached to it, it makes a huge difference. And it's not about doing nothing, though sometimes, meditation could be considered doing nothing, but you're really doing a lot. Sleeping could
Very
be like
much.
considered doing nothing, but we all have to sleep,
Yeah.
and your body's doing
Depends
stuff.
depends how energetic your sleep is too. I don't know about you, but I tend to go out and travel in the astral plane too much sometimes, and so I wake up exhausted. So, so yeah. I mean, if you looked at my diary, like I'm a not really organized Taurus, so every minute of the day is planned. But if you look deeper, you'll see that there's actually planned spontaneity in there. That
Mhm.
sounds very counterintuitive, but yeah, there has to be number one. There has to always be time for me first in there. Yes, all the work stuff and the clients, they absolutely are a priority to me. But if I can't function, what good am I to my clients and to everybody else in the world and to my kids and family? So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The difference between the laziness and the slowing down, completely different. Laziness has a belief system there that there's a sense of shame and punishment with it. Um, and I think a lot of women in particular, we've brought up with the idea that we need to do so that we can be rewarded with rest. Let's get rid of that idea, because the brain doesn't work that way. The brain loves it when you do something, then you reward yourself. Do something, then you reward yourself. So that do part for anyone could also be, as you said, it could actually be a meditation. So yes, there's meditations where I would expect it to be quite actually energetic and vibrant, and you'd come out buzzing from it. And there's meditations where you're just going to literally sit and just be in peace. So no two meditations are the same, but I think what we're getting at here is the concept. Then let's let go of the idea that when we slow down or we rest, that there's a sense of guilt or shame or punishment behind it because we haven't earned that right. You've earned that right by getting up in the morning and going about your day to be able to just be. Because when you find those little golden nuggets in the day where you just can sit, that's where your brain hemispheres start to align with each other. And how often do we allow ourselves to have that moment where our two hemispheres can come together in synchronicity and actually reform the way our world's going to work for that day? We just, as you said, we're so left brain. We go, 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 go. Then by the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, we're sitting on the couch wondering where our day's gone, and then feeling as though we're missing something in our worlds. Yeah, we're missing us. We're absolutely missing us in our own world.
I think that goes along with the being selfish and the don't daydream. Those are the and laziness. Those are the three things that as children we're taught are terrible things. You should never be lazy. And if you come and tell me you're bored, I'll find something for you to do.
Mhm.
Um, be bored.
Yeah.
Learn to be
Oh,
bored.
it's so important. And the daydreaming one's a classic because obviously, as a clinical hypnotherapist, my whole job is to play in a space of the unconscious mind, which,
Mhm,
I don't know how much your viewers are going to know about this, but the unconscious mind, it lives in the space of imagination. And
mhm.
it's incredibly powerful. It's about 95% of the operating system of your brain. So, imagination versus willpower, which is the conscious mind, our subconscious mind's going to win every day of the week. So if we can actually align what we want in our world with what our subconscious is actually visualizing, projecting for us, what a brilliant place to be. It means getting off the couch and going for that walk makes it so much easier instead of that internal struggle and that internal fight all the time. And so most of my job with my clients is to make sure that what they actually think they consciously want, does the subconscious mind actually align with that? Because if it doesn't, we have to have a good chat with that and we have to make sure that they're on the same page. And when it comes to imagination, I get a lot of adults coming in and I say to them, look, we're going to be playing with imagination a lot in my office. And they're like, oh, really? That's all imagination. That's pretend. That's not real. Well, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. So let's take advantage of that because we can change some pretty profound belief systems and some unpleasant behaviors that come out of the other end, basically through using the power of the imagination.
Yeah. And that is so powerful, that statement that your mind does not know the difference between what is imagined and what is a physical
Real. Yeah,
reality, because actually nothing exists.
exactly. Yeah, we're on the same page. And your personality is very easy to change when we mess with the reality.
Yeah. And it's if we could allow our children to understand that, you ask a kid, what are you going to be when you grow up? And they tell you I'm going to be a superhero. Who are you to tell them no?
Yeah, my
No,
kids have wanted to be dolphin trainers for many years, and now they laugh at that. And I'm like, hey, that's still a thing. Except the dolphins don't really need to be trained. So we'll redirect
maybe
their path.
they may be the ambassador, the dolphin ambassadors at some point, because dolphins are
Exactly.
highly intelligent beings
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
whales
Maybe the
and
dolphins should be training the humans.
right. And maybe they'll be the intermediary. You know,
Exactly. Yeah. My children have had a wild imagination from the moment they could talk, and that's something my husband and I have encouraged completely for them. I mean, there were times where they had their past life recalls going on, and we just made it as part of their everyday conversation with us. There was no ooh or leading them astray with those conversations. It was just to sit and hold the space for them to explore whatever that was for them. So as a
Mhm,
classic example of my oldest daughter once telling me about how she doesn't like the heat because she died in the heat. She said, Mum, I had much darker skin and I was wearing this little rag around my waist and I was holding this spear and I passed out and I just died because no one gave me water. And I was like, so who am I to correct that in her? Because that's just something she needs to express and explore. Let's not pretend that we own our children enough to correct those conversations.
and it may very well be true.
For her, it is. Yeah.
Well, it is true to her, and
Yeah.
because it's true to her,
Mm.
it's you know,
Yeah.
it
Well,
exists. That timeline exists somewhere because
absolutely. And I
she
do a lot of
connected to
work in
it.
that I do a lot of work in that quantum space with people in my office. Now, some will call it past life regression. I
Mhm,
tend to actually just call it quantum travel because, who knows what we're aligning with, which dimensions we're going, which timelines we're connecting with in the here and now. But it's so profound for people. And I've done over 80 myself, and it's incredibly life changing when you're in the right hands and it's a gentle process for the person and you're going there for the right reasons and not just to be curious. You're looking to unravel something that exists in this plane that's not serving you. That's
mhm.
where the gold nuggets are for people. And yeah, so many clients have walked away just astounded and completely changing their belief systems and going, because I'll certainly set them up to say, look, whatever comes up for you is real for you. It doesn't have to be real for me. I'm not here to judge. Who's my place to say? And I probably wouldn't share it with other people as well because they're going to think you're batshit crazy, excuse my French. But to be real frank, who cares? That's your experience. And if it brings you the healing and the result that you need, fantastic. That's exactly what we're here for.
I have a story about this whole thing, and in that
Mm,
my whole life I have been terrified of heights. Not like I can go in airplanes if I'm
mhm.
enclosed in a height, no problem. But open expanses where I can fall over a cliff,
Yeah.
I just like I have a visceral body reaction to it. Like
Yes.
it causes me to want to throw up. And it's been
Yeah.
that way as long as I can remember. And I had a vision of me as a young woman riding on a horse in England by the cliffs, and we went over the edge. That's how I died
Yeah.
in whatever that thing was. And I think
Yeah.
knowing that, having had that vision, I understand why I have this
Mm,
fear of these kinds of open spaces. And
yeah. Yeah.
it makes it easier for me because it's like, well, I don't have to be afraid of it. I'm not in that
Mm,
situation, and I'm possibly not going to die that way. Though
yeah.
we did actually, I was on a trip with my ex-husband a lot of years ago. We were up in the mountains and it was icy, and we caught ice
Mm,
with our vehicle and spun on this mountain road.
mm,
And the tires were like half off
mm.
the edge on my side.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Yeah. Look, I think there's a healthy level of fear there going on too, because
yeah.
that's something to remind yourself of. I mean, I used to have a ridiculous fear of fire. And
Mhm.
I think a healthy fear of anything that's dangerous for you. I mean, I live in Australia, so I don't want my kids running out and playing with the snakes and the spiders, etc. So a healthy level of fear is good,
Yeah.
and I would maintain that with all my clients. But I think there's a level of awareness that helps set you free. But beyond the awareness is the learning,
Mhm.
because you can experience and be part of one of these processes, but I think you really need to dive down deeper into it to go, what's the emotion, because it's always the emotional bridge that
Mhm.
keeps it coming back to us. What's the emotion that that my higher self is actually trying to show me in this moment, that needs to I need to release that, so we stop the looping, because it's only doing it is bringing it back to you because there's something that hasn't been learnt from it. And when we can do that, we break that need to continually bridge back to it. Okay, so I've had plenty of existences in the past where I've done the classical you'd have been burnt at the stake kind of thing and gone, ah, but it wasn't enough to have just understood that that's where it came from. It was to understand the story and the explanation behind how I got to that place, and that it's
Mhm.
okay to share who I am and all that kind of stuff that so many of us have gone through, that stop hiding, let it all out. And when you get to that place, you can just stop the emotions. In fact, I don't even remember what emotion got me there in the first place. It's obviously a level of fear of fire, but now I have no problem with fire at all. So I'm not going to go running into a fire, but at the same time, I can now be around the open fire or a bushfire, etc., and not freak out about things. Whereas I used to be that really annoying person that was always like, don't go anywhere near it. So there is that component. And so for me, I always ask the clients, it's not just about what's the belief system that's leading you to explore this. It's also about what's the emotional link that's going on here. And if we sit long enough and we're curious enough, we will find what the real underlying emotion is. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm just angry or I'm scared. We need to go a little deeper with that.
It's a trust. It has,
Mm,
for me, it is definitely a trust issue, which is
mm,
odd because it's just me and a horse and a cliff. But it's like you know, if you
yeah.
sit with it, you get that knowing, for
Yeah.
lack of a
You
better
get this,
word.
you get the downloads as to, okay, well, why am I being shown this?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's so fascinating
It
how
is.
we can take all of this information that's so available to us.
Mm,
But for so many years, we've just been like, no, you can't believe that. When
yeah. But I think, look,
it's
it also loops
helping
to
us.
all the way back to that conversation we had at the beginning as to we don't have the time to explore this stuff because we don't allow it.
Mhm.
And this is again, it's about that strategic slowdown. If you've got an emotion, shame, guilt, abandonment, rejection, whatever it is, it's not going anywhere. And it's going to keep showing up in different ways and forms and different people that come into your life until you take that time to strategically slow down and sit with this and learn what it is that needs to be learned so it can be released. You're a system, and you can't skip a part in the system, otherwise we have a complete systems failure. So there's if we want to look really technically, we need to be able to do that, and we have to be able to allow our neural pathways to realign to a new way of thinking once that emotion is gone as well. So there's a few different layers there, but you can't do it in the hustle culture. You've got to pull back and slow down.
It's really hard to control people who spend time um living intentionally. And it's not in most governments' best interest to have a large population that does that, but it's in the population's best interest to stop and live intentionally, because
Yeah.
that is where we're going to help each other have a better experience here and more novel experiences, because I think that's
Mm.
what we're here for. Is
Absolutely. I mean, I work with a whole range of people, and it's really nice to see men and women at high level executives coming in and exploring this work, because what they used to do doesn't work anymore. The high level masculinity that both men and women bring to the workforce
Mhm.
isn't working. And that level of compassion and that conscious leadership that needs to occur is what people are looking for. And I think it has sounds harsh to say, but COVID was the disaster we needed to have to start resetting for people. Because
Mhm.
certainly from a clinical perspective, for me, COVID brought out everybody's stuff.
Yep.
Their sense of isolation, loneliness, their abandonment, everything that came that was just percolating underneath, it all came up during COVID. So it was an invitation to release and reset. Whether you took that invitation or not, that's on you. But I think we're moving towards this sort of new earth concept. And I think when we get to this beautiful marker of what is it, about 27% of the population gets there, I think watch out, because we're unstoppable when we can actually go internally rather than all the external blame that likes to occur constantly. When we go internal, do the work, I think, as you said, we show up in the world of a, not I don't care, but it's more of a you do you, I'll do me.
Yeah. It's like I can be the color I am, and
Yeah,
you can be your
exactly.
color, and
Yeah,
we might look really good together, or we might
yeah.
clash. And if that happens, you could just like go stand over next to a color that makes you shine really pretty. It's
Well, you
not,
eventually
it's,
realize you are all the colors.
yeah, yeah, you are. We are all connected. We are all one.
That's all right. Actually, that's interesting. I should say, from the work in the quantum travels that I do, the amount of time that people who um, have sort of come into me, and they might be, they might be a little bit racist. They'll suddenly realize that, hang on a minute, damn it, I've been that person that I don't like in this life before, and vice versa. And so they've had plenty of existences where they've been everything and then some. And that's a real great way to humble someone, is when they have those experiences. And that's exactly what the higher self is here to do, is to shine that light on. You might need to adjust your thinking in this life, or you're going to continue to loop. And this issue of hatred, etc., is going to keep coming back and back and back.
From leaders. And in my worldview, there's no borders.
Yeah,
We just live in this realm that
yeah,
we live in, whatever shape you want to think
yeah,
it is.
mhm,
And we can move about and meet and have experiences and explore this
yeah,
this realm because it's amazing.
yeah,
And the more people that get into the you do you, I'll do me mindset, and that there's no good, bad. Those are just
yeah,
labels that we put on people um
yeah,
to justify ourselves, things in
mhm,
ourselves we might not like
yeah,
often. And the more that we can get out of that and into the,
mm,
just be curious. Let's see what you're doing and how you're doing
yeah,
it and where you're going and what have you
yeah,
seen? Share with
yeah,
me,
yeah. And it's funny because I say to my clients a lot, like, there's a lot of black and white thinking that goes on in this world.
Mhm.
As you said, everything's right or wrong, it's good or bad. But if you just allow yourself to play in the gray space in between on this spectrum, life becomes a lot easier, because when you're not right nor wrong, you just are. And some people are like, no, I have a very scientific husband, and sometimes we have these conversations a lot. And he's, what is truth tends to come up a lot this nowadays. After everything we've been through about, false facts, etc. It's very difficult to find out, certainly from a universal perspective, as to what is a truth nowadays, because it always runs through the filters of your life, your perspective, your traumas, everything you've been through. And I always, use that classic example of to my children of, well, if the number 6 was written on the ground and you were standing on one side and somebody else was standing on the other, is it's a 6 to you, but it's a 9 to them, and both are true. So let's just be open and aware that that can exist, and that power of critical thinking. I think that needs to be taught more in schools, to be able to hold two opposing ideas in your head and be okay with it, not have to
Yeah, and not
force
have to have an
one to be
opinion
true.
about it.
Yeah.
It can just be.
Yeah, but
And
none of
there's
this really works unless we have a chance, like you and I right now, to slow down and have these conversations. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not a huge socialite, and I can't stand the white noise conversations people have with each other all the time. I would rather sit with one person and go deep on some amazing concepts together, so we can both expand our consciousness, as opposed to talking about the weather or politics.
yes, I'm with you. That's why I
Good.
do what I do. I get that
Yeah.
opportunity. And we get to have some interesting conversations. And to me, there is a difference between truth and facts. A fact is something that's repeatable, testable, and observable and doesn't change. A truth is just open to interpretation. It depends on which side of the squiggly thing
Yeah,
you're standing on, whether it's a 6 or a 9
exactly.
or a 1 or an L
Yep,
or an
yep.
O and a 0. And does it really matter
No, well, no, really.
in
I mean,
the
there's very
long
few
run?
things, as I always say to my kids, is this going to matter on your deathbed? Let it go. So, so many people come to me though because that very issue of not being able to let it go,
Mhm.
and that does require some deeper internal work to understand what's behind that.
Mhm. It doesn't, just because I say that doesn't invalidate other people's feelings that it does matter, because to them it might really matter.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
there's obviously going to be something behind why it matters so much, why
Yeah,
they have to hang on to it.
yeah.
But I can tell
And
you,
as
if you
a
can
trauma
just let it
specialist
go.
myself, yeah, well, as a trauma specialist myself, it's easy to say let it go. But for those that are still holding on to their traumas, it's almost physically impossible for them to do that
Mhm.
until they have that deeper understanding. And they won't know those traumas unless they see a behavior that's coming out of them that they really don't like. And for some, like I have one person that comes to me, and for them, it was that they didn't like the biting their nails. And most people are like, oh, I'll just do a quick hypno session, it'll be gone in a day. But for me, I'm like, I actually want to understand the deeper cause to this, because that's just the symptom. What really triggered this in the first place? And so that's something that I'm very, very aware of with people. I don't just go in and deal with symptoms with anyone. I think that's a waste of time for people. If you go for the root cause, it's just like pulling that chain of pearls at the very beginning and letting it all go, as opposed to having to deal with every single trauma in your life. Who's got time for that? Go all the way back to the beginning, find
Mhm.
what's really embedded in your psyche, and go from there.
So that kind of brings me around to, how do you actually work with people? Is it one-on-one? Is it in groups? Is it courses?
It's it's both. So I do work with people online all over the world. I do deep transformations with them one on one, and then I also have a group program that I keep specifically for the healers, the practitioners, those people that are the helpers, I will call them,
Mhm.
that don't necessarily have a safe space for them to just vent, for them to let it out. It's not about trauma bonding. We don't do that. What we do is make sure that they've got that place where they can expand their consciousness as well. Because when we're constantly working on everybody else all the time, we sometimes forget ourselves. And so this is a bit of a homecoming for them and a remembering of why they started in the first place and looking after themselves. I mean, we go through some business concepts and very much about the identity of them and their business, but it is much more about a soul level conversation. So yeah, I definitely work online and in person all over the place. Mm.
Do you work with companies?
I do. Yep. I come from the corporate world. I have marketing and business background. So I do work as a consultancy and I come in and I help organizations and specifically tend to also talk to executives because I think the ripple down effect is a beautiful thing. And when they can let go of their traumas, when they can work cohesively as a team at the executive level, C-suite, life is a lot more pleasant, so to speak. But yeah,
For
people can
everyone.
reach out to me. Yeah, people can reach out to me on my website and they can certainly see all the different things I do. I'm also a professional speaker as well. So there's a range there of ways people can access me and my stuff.
Awesome. Awesome. And they can schedule a 45-minute consult with you to just like understand all of the
Yeah.
nuances of what you have to offer. And
Yep.
you also offer a free strategic slowdown meditation.
Yeah, I do. A slow down meditation as well as a strategic slowdown checklist, like a daily priority checklist for them so that they can start to see some of the areas that they can improve. That's all available on my website. The 45-minute call is really a chance to get some clarity as to, is this even right for them? Is this what they need? Because I'm very honest. I'm like, if this is not what you need, I will refer you. But I think that I have 3 different programs on offer. And generally speaking, from that call, we can work out, well, do you need just a short term work? Do you need slightly longer? None of my programs really go beyond 3 months. I don't believe in talk therapy for 20 years. I feel as though we can get it done pretty quickly. Even though I'm like into the strategic slowdown, it's the work we do within the container of the program that slows us down. But the program itself is pretty fast. So yeah, I would say there's always something in there for everyone. It just depends where they're at. So one of those reasons that I do those calls is I need to make sure people are ready. Not everyone's ready for this process, but you kind of know when you've got that burning desire to just, I've got to get through something, make the call.
Awesome. And they can find you at taniadavies.com.
TaniaDavies.com,
Yeah,
and you'll find all the links there.
awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tania. It's been great chatting with you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
To learn more about Tania and to get your free strategic slowdown meditation or reach out to her to schedule a consult, please visit taniadavies.com, and we'll be sure to put that link in the show notes below. If you have a podcast or you're interested in starting one to get your message in front of our huge and active audience, be sure to reach out to us at support@heartlifecoach.com. We love to help spiritual entrepreneurs and coaches amplify their voice and monetize their mission, and offer a variety of ways to do this on Substack. Join us for our next episode as we share what others are doing to raise the global frequency. And remember, change begins with you. You have all the power to change the world. Start today and get visible.